So there are major movements to abolish admissions tests for higher education, like the SAT or GRE. And I've always scored well on them, so I like them. But I wonder if you think that's a mistake. And one argument against these tests that I see all the time is that the richest students are best able to afford preparation and thus inflate their scores. But the main reason I would think that this isn't that pressing of a criticism is that preparation can't improve scores that much. And if they're only improved, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 percentage points, people are probably treated very similar by admissions committees that are in that interval.
Well, there's a lot there. Um, Standardized tests like the SAT are effectively intelligence tests. Nobody really who sells the SAT wants to say that because the SAT test is controversial enough without saying it's also an intelligence test. But one of the reasons criticisms of IQ testing is diminishing is because the critics of standardized testing have essentially won. They've won the argument. Most colleges and universities are eliminating the SAT. It's gone. With no SAT scores, there are no gaps anymore. Problem solved. It's just like the National Rifle Association made sure laws were passed that the Centers for Disease Control couldn't get data on gun violence. No data, no problem. It's exactly the same thing. At the University of California, interestingly, recently got rid of the SAT. No more. You can't use it. They banned it. And this was after a 2-year inquiry into the SAT by a faculty task force with real experts in psychometrics and sociology, real experts in all the disciplines you would need to understand the problem. And the conclusion of the task force was the SAT is a valuable tool in college admission. We should keep it, especially because it helps identify underprivileged kids who otherwise would fall through the cracks that we can help. Okay, that was their conclusion. Yeah. And it went up, and the chancellor of the whole system looked at this and said, we're going to ban it anyway. That's the politics of it, I guess. So you are correct when you say, when used with other admission criteria, whether somebody gets a 650 or a 630 might not make much difference. It's a tricky thing, but personnel selection or student selection is another very sophisticated set of metrics. You could let everybody in, but then you're going to have some people who can't do it. You can have various cutoffs, but each cutoff will have false positives and false negatives. And every institution kind of has to figure out what they want. So if you're a medical school and you want the best students, you have a certain cutoff on the MCATs. Well, you get rid of the MCATs, what do you go by? You don't have that anymore. And political criteria, there's no evidence that political criteria give you better outcomes in terms of competence than things like the SAT. So the country now is embroiled in this contest between meritocracy and what generally might be called social justice or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the pendulum over time swings back and forth. We used to have not too long ago, it was mostly meritocracy. You could have a certain cutoff on the SATs and have a lottery within the people who met that cutoff, and you would probably do just as well. If you get rid of the SATs and you want to swing back toward having goals of equity, then that's another story. There are pluses and minuses. Somehow a balance has to be found. It's not up to scientists to figure it out. I mean, when you see the University of California task force making an empirical recommendation or a recommendation based on empirical data, and the decision makers decide, well, we have other criteria. This is the world in which we live.
One dimension of my question that you didn't touch on was the extent to which preparation can impact scores.
There have been a lot of studies of that. And the studies generally show, well, here's what the complicating factor. The older studies on this issue show that preparation had very little, if any, impact. Okay. The newer studies, however, do find that preparation can improve scores. And this is a result of removing the G-loaded items from the SAT. By getting rid of the analogies, you're making it a less G-loaded intelligence test, and therefore, ironically, more amenable to training and practice and coaching. So when my kids were taking it, it was still difficult to coach. I knew it, but all the other kids were doing the $1,500 course. We did it too, even though I knew it wouldn't change things. And in fact, it barely moved the needle. And nowadays, I'm not sure that's true. Nowadays, I think you can have some benefit, more than just a review.
So the SAT then has diverged pretty significantly from IQ tests.
I don't know what pretty significantly means.
Well, it's
but
much less G-loaded than it once was.
It's less G-loaded. Empirically, how much that is, I can't say. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, so the whole testing enterprise is complicated. I mean, the people have different motivations. There's economic motivations in terms of selling the test. There are implications for colleges and universities in terms of selecting students. There's a general feeling that colleges and universities, like the SAT, have courses and majors now that don't require that high level reasoning ability that still is required for some majors like physics and chemistry and so on. So, if you are the chairman of a physics department and your undergraduates have an average SAT math score, 650, 700, most of those kids will probably finish the major. If kids have a SAT math score of 500 and they go into physics, the probability is they won't finish. Not that they necessarily can't, but most of them won't finish. It's a probability issue, hard to tell for individual cases. But if you eliminate the SAT math, then the chairman of the physics department really doesn't know what he's dealing with, how to adjust accordingly. So these are all complicated issues. I don't know how to solve any of them. I'm interested in understanding what intelligence is, where it comes from, and how we might be able to improve it. That is a lifetime full of work, and it's a work in progress. And I think we're making progress on those things. And all these other criticisms, they're really voiced more as statements of fact. They're really irrelevant to me because they're not empirically correct.